So, Lena, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation with me on the podcast. We worked together, when was it? Maybe like a year ago we started? Could that be right?
Yes, I believe, well, actually, I believe we started a little earlier. But yeah, we did definitely work together up until last year.
Yeah, amazing. So, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background
Mhm.
and what initially prompted you to reach out to me, what you felt like you needed help with? And I also think it's kind of fun the way that you found me because it was so like kind of unique and interesting. So maybe just talk a little bit about your background and then
Mhm.
we can talk about that little piece too.
Yeah, so I have a background. I've been working in sort of the SaaS tech space for the last 6+ years, and been working. I'm based in Oslo in Norway, and generally worked for international global companies. And I would say that I'm, as a person, always been the type of person that always looks to sort of evolve and grow and not stay put in the same place, both physically but also I'd say emotionally and mentally. And I had reached a point with in my role with my manager where I wasn't feeling satisfied. On one hand, there were things happening in the organization, things were changing that I I didn't experience as very positive for me. And overall, I think also questioning a bit where I was in my career. Up until that point, I had felt, I think, that a lot of the places where I had ended up in my career had been a bit of the result of like by chance, like happy accidents. And while I felt that, I was very grateful and happy about the places where I had gotten. It felt like those um, that change or those decisions were driven more by coincidence than intentionality. And I had a very good relationship with the manager I had at the time, and we spoke about this and how I felt like, yeah, I wasn't quite sure whether this was the right place or the right role for me long term. And he was not afraid to discuss this and to for me to explore this further. And so he encouraged me to seek out some coaching, and I did. But I had never worked with a coach before, and I honestly didn't know quite where to start. But he said that I should just go with someone that feels right. And um, as a side, I'm like many other people. I enjoy pop culture and TV and movies, and I had been watching this particular television show called The Bear, and I really, really enjoyed season two, as I think a lot of people did. It was a great season, and that show just had me reflecting, thinking about the great leadership lessons. And as it would have it at the time, I was also very active on LinkedIn, and there is a particular corner of LinkedIn, if you know, where everyone is like eager to sort of have these inspirational posts about where to find, like, how to, sort of bridging pop culture and the leadership lessons in sort of a LinkedIn context. And I saw all this talk about how leadership in TV series, and I didn't see anyone mentioning the bear. And I was like, well, if there was ever a TV show that was interesting to talk about in terms of leadership, it should be the bear. And just out of curiosity, I just like typed into, I forget if it was Google or YouTube, I was just, leadership lessons, the bear, and there was your podcast episode. And I was like listening to it and thinking, yeah, no, she really hit the nail on the head. And then of course I realized, oh, you also do coaching. Well, perfect. Maybe this is exactly what I've been looking for. And as fate would have it, it was.
Yeah, it worked out. I love that story because on so many levels. Number one, I think that was such a fun, common place for us to be aligning on. And the fact that it's connected to like a TV show that we were inspired by, I just love. But also, I tell my clients all the time, the ones that are sort of fostering their own business and trying to reach the right clients, you can't do it without really connecting to people in a way that feels really true to who you are. And what was ironic about that podcast episode was I was so self-conscious about recording it. We've talked about this, but for me to like relay leadership lessons to TV shows, like I come from like a film and TV background. So I'm always looking for like the subtext and what are the writers thinking and where did those ideas come from? So I was truly inspired by that episode, or I mean, mainly that one episode, but also by the whole season, and compelled to talk about it. And I just love that that was the door that you walked through, which is also funny because I don't get that many people walking through the podcast door, but I just love it because I feel like it's the best way for people to really like understand who I am and what my approach is. So I just love that story. And I love that that was like our connection point because I think it just kind of set us up for kind of the rest of the journey. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what you just said, what was happening with you at your job. So let's recap too. Like on paper, that job was pretty great. Like you were getting paid well. It was a company that was sort of moving at the time, moving in a direction that seemed exciting to you. There were some interesting prospects. And I think you knew, because you're tuned in to yourself, you knew it wasn't quite right for you, that you were looking for something else. And I think you used this metaphor a lot, like, I'm a farmer, like I want to be able to kind of like foster growth. And I don't feel like I have that. So I want to like recap that piece. But it took you some time, and I think this is really important, to get from this job is pretty good on paper, although it doesn't feel aligned, to actually leaving that job and finding something that felt aligned. Because I think that's the moment where people have a lot of difficulty sort of realizing, like, what's the risk if I leave this? What's the risk if I stay? And like really managing that part in the middle is, I think, where coaching can be helpful. But it took some time. So maybe talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, there were, of course, some other factors contributing to how I was feeling and how I was doing at that place of work. Over time, it became an increasingly more challenging place for me to thrive, and I knew that this wasn't the place for me to be long term. I knew there was. I knew there would be an end date. I just didn't know exactly when that end date was coming, and the workload was becoming increasingly stressful. And yeah, I mean, it was taking a toll on me as well. And that's also then difficult because finding a new job and looking for other opportunities is something that requires a lot of energy, and it requires you to have focus and have capacity for that kind of work, because at the end of the day it's really hard work to find the right next place of employment. And I was really grateful that I had you as a coach and as a sounding board, because I think I was definitely reaching a point where I was about to be burned out. And that also was difficult because, I had these ideas of people being burnt out, being people that, were juggling a million things, perhaps having, little children and all these other commitments outside of work. And I had, for the first time in my adult life, really sort of stepped back from a lot of my other commitments outside of work. And I was really just focusing on work and trying to get by doing that. And I still felt that there wasn't enough bandwidth with the mental load and just the overall workload that I had on me at the time. And thinking that, okay, but I am sort of functioning well enough, and this is on paper a good job. Like, I have a great salary, I have some great colleagues, this surely isn't what being burnt out is. And I sort of imagine that being burnt out is a binary, that it is either you're not burnt out or you are burnt out, rather than it being a matter of degrees. And rather than sort of visualizing that, like, either I'm fine or I am this like pile of ash that has been burnt out, I am more so like I'm on fire, but not like I'm on fire in the kind of good way that we say when something's great, like I'm on fire, I just nailed this, but like I'm on fire, like the house is burning and there is a crisis still, even though there's still like I'm not completely destroyed, like I'm not a pile of ash yet, but if I don't address this now, that is what the outcome will be. And that took me some time to come to terms with, that just because there's still something left of me doesn't mean that this is not a crisis.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so important because I think for high achieving people such as yourself, also, there's a point too where you can manage so much because you're a high functioning, high level, strong work ethic kind of person. You can manage a lot. And so you're already managing likely more than other people. So you think that that's like the normal equilibrium, right? And then even like one bit lower than that, you're like, oh no, I'm not performing at my best. And there's a lot of like blame and shame in that process of determining, is it okay for me to take a rest? Is it okay for me to take a break? And I think I love the metaphor of like the binary. I'm not Ash, so I should be okay. But again, you're likely functioning at like 150%. We've probably talked about this, instead of 100% or even like 75%, which is really like the healthy range. But because you're so used to functioning at that high level, there's a lot of that. Like once you come down to even 100%, there's like guilt around it. Like, oh no, I should be functioning at a higher level. I'm not allowed to take a break, which I think is really key. But I think there's this other piece where if we're managing this very fragile equilibrium, as soon as you add something new, you have to take something off. But I think that's another thing of where guilt comes into play, where it's like, well, I don't have kids and I don't have these other obligations. I shouldn't have to take something else off. But you have to find that balance for yourself, not comparing yourself to other people, but like knowing when that time is to take a break so that you don't become Ash. Like it's okay to take a break before you're broken. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And it also helped me to sort of realize that there are also different kinds of stress. And that's becoming increasingly more noticeable to me now, where I am in an environment where I have a lot on my plate. I have a lot to do, but I don't feel or experience any stress to the degree that I did at that time. Like I'm not going to bed worrying about what I'm going to get done the next day. Like, even though I know I have a massive, like, I have a lot on my plate for sure. There are a lot of things to juggle and to make happen, but um, realizing that there might also be other types of stress. And by that I mean, do you have a manager that is supportive and that understands you, and what's the work, like the culture in your workplace? Like, is it a safe space? Do you feel like you have the psychological safety to be yourself and to speak up? And does anyone listen if you say, hey, actually I think what we're doing right now is counterproductive to the overall objectives that we say that we want to achieve? And do you have power to influence your work? And so I think that as well was something that I didn't quite realize, I think, at the time, the degree to which that was also having an impact on my well-being.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note also, because again, in this role of I just call it high achieving because I don't really have another great description. But I think in this role that we take on, and I put myself in the same bucket, we first look at ourselves. Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, is this feedback from my manager accurate? And we have to like go through that cycle for a while before we can look at them objectively and say, actually, maybe that isn't the kind of feedback I need to thrive. And maybe that's okay. And maybe this isn't the kind of environment where I'm thriving, even though I love my colleagues, which I think is a really big, important piece to a lot of people. Like, they don't want to leave the comfort of that really nice colleague kind of ecosystem, which you had. That's a hard thing to leave. Although we can say, like, we can still be friends with those people outside of work if we have those kinds of relationships. But it takes a while also to be reflective enough and to be confident enough to understand that maybe that manager is not going to be the person that's going to get you to the next level, and being okay with that. Because we blame ourselves, like, well, maybe I need to be a better performer, or maybe I need to do this differently. And I think it's also okay to understand that this person is not going to be the person that's going to get me to the next level. So I either need to usurp them in some way, which is not creating a great dynamic, or I need to find a place where I'm in a culture where those managers are trained to support and guide people like me. And I want to say one last thing that I think is important about you specifically is that you are a visionary. And this is something we talked about a lot in the coaching. You saw that, but you didn't necessarily see it as a place where you could grow into and really step into those roles. You were still a little bit playing small. And then when you got into an environment where that was coveted and people were like excited about that skill set, you start to feel like you can open up and expand into that place. Whereas in the other environment, you felt like you kind of had to like pare that back because you were just taking on more work and you weren't getting like the actual recognition you needed for that skill.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what changed? So now you're saying you have a lot on your plate. It could be overwhelming to some people, but the environment feels different, the manager support feels different. So what else was a shift for you where you don't go to sleep or go to bed feeling like overwhelmed with the amount of things you have to do? What else happened in that change to make you feel more balanced now?
Well, I think one of the first things was how I approached what I was looking for in a new role. Um, just to also give some context, towards the end of my previous employment, we agreed that I would take a severance leave. So I left the company and had some time then to find my bearings, so to speak, and yeah, reflect and just figure out what would be the most appropriate next steps. And yeah, I realized from us working together that I wanted to become more like you said, a farmer. And also, just to give people a bit of context why I say farmer, because I'm not into actual farm work, is because I previously or I've been working as a customer success manager. And in our industry, it's customer success managers are usually compared to salespeople, who are then described as the hunters. They go hunt new deals, new business, whereas the customer success managers are farmers. And I really resonated with that analogy. That's why I was interested in customer success management, because I like the idea of nurturing the relationships and just building on what you already have on a customer base. But then with working with you, I also came to realize that it's not just the work with customers, sort of the CS work, that I find interesting. It's the whole ecosystem in which we operate. So I started envisioning myself more as someone who would want to be a gardener, to share on that analogy of the farmer. I want to not only help set the groundwork and nourish the environment in which the hunters, the farmers, anyone else is operating in the organization, I want to make sure that everyone thrives. So also internally, making sure that we have sufficiently good processes. People are set up for success in their work. So not just being a customer success manager, but just like a success manager. Let's make sure people are successful with what they are doing here in this organization. And having that in the back of my mind, I knew that going into a more sort of standard cookie cutter role would not be the right fit. I interviewed for many positions where, you know, on paper, I would have been a great fit. Like I have all the right skills, the right qualifications. I would have jumped right into a team where they already have everything built, ready to go. You can just take this and run from day one. And I knew that that wouldn't be right for me, because that would just be a little bit too easy, or just a little bit too familiar. Like I wanted something a little bit more where I could contribute into shaping what the work would look like, and actually help improve the processes and the ways of working, and enabling success internally in the organization as well. And that's what I found in my current role, which I'm very, very thankful for. Also, found a manager that I really enjoy working with, and I think that was key to me being in the position that I am today. Knowing and being intentional that this is what I want, so this is what I am looking for. And full transparency, like, you know, those months where I was looking and interviewing for jobs and things weren't clicking, it wasn't the right fit, because like I said, I had something very particular in mind for myself. There were moments where I thought, oh gosh, shouldn't I just take this job, like, just so that I know, okay, this is what it is, and then maybe over time I'll, you know, I thought about settling many times in those months, just because of the uncertainty that I was in. It's you know, I don't I don't enjoy that uncertainty, but I'm very glad that I didn't do that, and that I stuck around, and now ended up where I am now, where I feel like I have much more support, and I'm able to contribute also to the overall well-being, and contribute to the overall ecosystem in the organization as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. 2 points that I think are important there. This idea of taking a little bit of time, you got lucky because you got a severance. But I think for people considering burnout leave or considering just taking a sabbatical between jobs, one of the things I love about coaching while you're in your old position before you make the transition is it's not risky to stay in your current job and make it better and bolster it and put some new boundaries in place, which we worked on together. I think that's important to changing old patterns and behaviors, because you might think this environment is slightly toxic, or I'm not jiving with this environment, so I'm going to just desperately jump to a new job. And sometimes people take no time in between. And what I see happen time and time again is that they land in a new job that's also not a great fit. And then they're just spiraling, and it really can deplete their self-worth and their self-esteem to just jump into another job that is basically the same job, but it felt different because there's that honeymoon phase. So I think that part of the transition is important, to start the coaching or start the process while you're in your current job, start that application process so that you can wait it out the way that you did. Some people don't have the luxury of you know, being on a severance. So I would say just take your time so you don't have to deal with, I mean, you're going to deal with the discomfort of your current job, but that time feels so critical so that you land in the position that feels like the right fit. And one thing that we talked about, that I talk to a lot of clients about, is this idea of find the culture that feels like a good fit. Be shopping around for that culture, vet that culture, rather than just blindly applying to the jobs that feel like the right fit, because you do need to feel a part of an environment, especially for you and the kind of role you want to fill, that's going to help you get to the next place. So I'm curious, since we had talked about that, how did you kind of vet the culture? How did you vet your new manager to see if they were going to be a better fit for you?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the most difficult things I found in the interview process, because how do you vet for culture when you interview? You only get to you only get to interview with a few people, and it's speaking from experience, like there's a lot of ways companies can make themselves appear to have a great work culture externally that don't necessarily speak to what it's like on the inside. And so I focus primarily on, having a good manager. Of course, managers can change, but I always think that if you don't feel like you have good chemistry and with your manager, then it doesn't really matter if everything else is great, because your manager is the one person that you're going to be reporting to and ultimately working the closest together with. And then I was also fortunate that as part of my interview process, I also interviewed with the Norwegian CEO for the company, and that was also great because that gave me a sense of the overall sort of values and leadership perspectives from the very top of the organization. I work for a very large organization, and so that was very helpful. Of course, I also had an interview with the head of HR, and it it was very difficult. And I have to say, like, even when I signed the contract, I wasn't 100% sure if it would be a good culture fit, but I had inquired a lot about, how is it working there? Are there, what is it like? How do coworkers work? Is it a hybrid workplace? Are people in the office all the time? Like, how do people work here? How do they get along? And what is the tenure like? Are there a lot of people here that have been working here for more than 3 years? Which I also found there's a lot of people that have worked for this, or for the company for 10, 20 years, and that have just transitioned into different roles, as well as there being, of course, people that have maybe worked there for 3 to 5 years. So these were all things that I thought, okay, this is all great. And then one final thing that I also thought was very positive is that they do have a sort of an employee social club that most people are part of. It's voluntarily to be part of it, because you are deducted, I believe, the equivalent of like €2 per month to be in membership dues, which goes back to that money goes then back to the different initiatives that the club organizes. And I thought that was a really great thing, that there is this sort of mini organization within the organization that is just in charge of ensuring that there's different activities and things that we do together as co-workers. So I thought that was very positive. And yeah, I suppose I took a bit of a leap of faith as well, and knowing that, at the end of the day, you have to just be there and feel it. But knowing that I had a good manager, and that I also really looked up to the CEO, I felt that I should be in good hands. And so far, I've been here now for almost 4 months. I would say that has held true.
Great. That's obviously a relief for me to hear after the work that we did together. But I also think there's one other little piece to that, and it might seem less important and maybe superficial, but there's also kind of an instinct that happens. So you do the vetting process, you ask the questions you can ask, the things that are important to you, which you did. And I think your questions were fantastic. And you wanted to see if you had chemistry with a manager, also huge. But when you go to sign that contract, and it's kind of like anything in life, there's never someone standing next to you going, this is 100% going to be the right fit. And here's the crystal ball. And we can tell you this is going to be great. But I think there's an instinct, and we have it when we go into interviews where it's not going to be the right fit. And sometimes we just suppress it because we're like, but I need a job. So who cares? All these red flags are going off, but I'm just going to like pretend like they're not there. But they're always there. We always know when there are red flags, and we always know when it's like, it's feeling pretty good. Like maybe there's a reason I should question it. Maybe I should ask more questions. Maybe it's not going to be the right fit. But if there aren't any blaring red flags, it's the best thing you can do, right? Like all you can do is just, do your vetting, but then feel for, is there resistance? Like, do I have a weird panicky feeling when I walk into the office? Do I have a weird feeling when I'm around the CEO or my manager? Those things are also important because our body always knows. And I know that's like a weird woo-woo thing to add, but I think it's huge because I've been in tons of interviews where I'm like, this does not feel like the right fit for me, but I'm going to do it anyway because everything on paper seems right. And my logical brain is like, just say yes. Who cares about the rest? And every time I've had that feeling, I've ended up in a bad position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that also took me some time. Like when I first started, I would say like the first 4 weeks of me working there, I felt like I was a little bit more guarded. It took some time until I really felt like, oh, okay, like I can lower my shoulders now, and I feel more at home. And I also brought that up with my manager, of course, because I hadn't shared the full extent to everything that I had gone through with my previous place of employment. But he and so I mentioned, like, now now I feel like I can finally breathe, and I feel more at ease here, and um, that was very nice to see.
Yeah, that's great too. I think that piece of sharing. I know a lot of people who have gone through burnout, they find it, and not that I'm saying you went through burnout, but I think that's a story people take with them forward. And it's hard to talk about sometimes too, like what you experienced in the past. But I do think if you have the right relationship with your manager, it's good to bring that stuff forward because it's going to affect your work, at least in the beginning. You're going to be bringing whatever baggage came from the last place, whatever PTSD. And it is important to just find a place for it so you can just put it away and move on. But I think it's helpful if sometimes certain colleagues or your manager know pieces of that story, they can help you move past it because none of those stories are true anymore, right? It was a thing that happened in the past. The concerns or insecurities that you built up at that place, they're now gone, but they're still lingering. You need a place to put them down. And sometimes it's helpful to have that conversation. So I'm happy that you trust your manager enough to have those kinds of conversations with them.
No, definitely. And it was also important to me because I felt like I wasn't, as long as I still had that guard up, I wasn't showing up fully and authentically as myself because I was still having a little bit of a guard and a shield up. And um, I've I've already been told that I can sometimes seem like I'm a bit intimidating, so which I in my mind, if you know me and you've spent more than like 20 minutes with me, you know that I am I'm very much an approachable. I'm a softie, but I have what's sometimes referred to as the resting bee face, which is just an unfortunate thing. I can't really do much about it. So it's you know so when people also on top of that don't know me, they might think, oh, she's maybe a little bit unapproachable, and with if I'm on top of that also carrying this shield or this guard around myself, then certainly I cannot seem very approachable, and just being able to let that go, and just be honest and like, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I came from. I'm really happy to be here, and that I don't have to worry about that anymore, but this is where I came from, that allowed me to be more present and be more authentically who I am now, in my interactions with people.
Yeah, it's so great. It's so great. And the reason that we got back in touch after, you know, kind of ending our coaching program together and then you moving into this new position, but I wanted to create a program to support people who are in that burnout phase but don't know they're in that transition phase. And I reached out to you because I feel like your story is so helpful and your transition has been so successful. And, you know, just going on that journey with you for me too was just, it was an honor to be able to work with you through that phase. And I'm so happy you ended up where you are on the other side of that, and like owning all your skills too, because I think that's so important. Like really owning and stepping into your gifts and your talents and not letting some work environment or, you know, certain people limit you or make you feel like you're not as amazing as you are. So I love that you have the support. But that was why I reached out to you, and I just really appreciate you sharing your story, because for people who are in that moment of transition, it feels so isolating, it's so painful, and you just can't see, you don't have that crystal ball. You can't see that there could be something better over here, and people really hold on tightly to what they have for all the right reasons. But I love your story because it shows people that once you kind of move through the paces of that journey, you can end up somewhere that is just such a better fit for who you are.
Yeah, no, thank you. And your working with you has been immensely valuable in this process. I dare to think what it would have been like navigating this without you. But I also think the fact that I had you as a resource, and that we'd had all these discussions, and that we'd done all this work reflecting on what it is I want for myself, and where it is that I want to go, that enabled me to actually get that, because it's not, you're not, it's very unlikely that you're going to get what you want if you don't know how to ask for it.
Yes. Yes.
And that was exactly why I wanted to just work with a coach, is to be more intentional, just to not like end up somewhere by chance. I wanted to be intentional about that next step, which I did, and it was so important that I was. So I'm very grateful for the work that we got to do.